All right, that was a great discussion. Let's see what you guys think. So, the first question, how would you describe the three main characters? The group I talked with had a lot of thoughts, which is good. So, beginning with the boyfriend character, their answer basically is he's rich, he's confident, and he's a sociopath, which in this case means he doesn't really understand other people, doesn't feel what other people feel, lacks empathy. Um, and I think we can all agree that he's a sociopath from the way that he talks about burning barns. Um, he knows it is a criminal act, but he doesn't show any kind of remorse or hesitation. To him, it's just another fact. And so, one way that this group describes him is um, that the law is not a limit, it's just another boundary that he can choose to cross or not to cross. And so, like, the fact that he's a sociopath also seems to be connected to the fact that he's rich, in the sense that if money is power, then he has power to do most things. And that's why he wants to do things that money cannot buy him, such as illegal things. Um, Things that, you know, people who are not sociopaths, who do feel empathy, would feel bad doing. Those are the things that he wants to do because it's not something that money can usually buy. Um, then we move on to the protagonist, the person telling us this story, the narrator. So this group says that the narrator feels kind of uh, empty or detached. So he does care about things, right? When he's chatting with the girl, he says that he enjoys it very much. This is page 54. We talked intensely. She'd hear me out, and I'd listen to whatever she had to say. We hardly had any common topics between us, but so what? We became, well, pals. So he enjoys talking with her, but then we have the next sentence. Of course, I was the one who paid the bill for all the food and drinks. Sometimes she'd call me, typically when she was broke and needed a meal. And then it was unbelievable the amount of food she could put away. So he enjoys talking with her, even though he has to pay sometimes a lot. So, like, what makes this relationship worth it for him? When the two of us were together, I could truly relax. I'd forget all about work I didn't want to do and trivial things that had never be settled anyway, and the crazy mixed up ideas the crazy mixed up people had taken into their heads. It was some kind of power she had. Not that there was any great meaning to her words. And if I did catch myself interjecting polite nothings without really tuning in what she was saying, there was still something soothing to my ears about her voice, like watching clouds drift across the far horizon. So he thinks it's worth it because listening to her talk makes him feel relaxed. We also get a hint of something deep inside him here. The crazy mixed up ideas that crazy mixed up people had taken into their heads. We don't get a lot of feelings from him throughout this story. This is one of the few moments we can see inside his head. And it seems to be he often does not feel relaxed. And one main reason is because he thinks a lot of people have crazy ideas and he has to deal with those ideas. Do we know what he does for work? No, right? Doesn't say. Um, but it probably requires interacting with people, and it doesn't seem like he likes a lot of those people. So when this group says that he's kind of detached, maybe it goes further. Maybe he's a little bit antisocial, just a little bit. And then he says he also talks as well, everything from personal matters to sweeping generalities. I told her my honest thoughts. I guess she also let some of my verbiage go by, likewise with minimum comment, which was fine by me. It was a mood I was after, not understanding or sympathy. Interesting, interesting. So he's spending time talking with her and listening to her talk. They don't have common topics of conversation, but he thinks that's all fine because he's not looking for understanding or sympathy. He's just looking for a feeling, I guess the feeling of being relaxed or not anxious. So he's having conversations without a real human connection. Does this kind of remind you a little bit about the boyfriend? Like here, our main character does have feelings, but he doesn't seem to care a lot about her feelings. He doesn't even seem to care a lot about her. He just likes to spend time with her because it makes him feel some kind of way. Maybe not a sociopath, but maybe more self-centered, putting himself first. And then because he's a writer, we also should mention, as this group pointed out, when the boyfriend talks about what it means to be a writer. Uh, page 60. So this is in the middle of the guy telling him that he burns barns. He said, the boyfriend says, "You're someone who writes novels, so I thought, wouldn't he be interested in patterns of human behavior and all that?" And the way I see it, with novelists, before even passing judgment on something, aren't they the kind who are supposed to appreciate its form? And even if they can't appreciate it, they should at least accept it at face value, no? So the way that the boyfriend describes a writer is not about psychology, it's not about like human connection or understanding. It's about observing patterns, appreciating form, presenting things at their face value. It's very superficial, right? We don't really enter the depth of what makes a human think or do a certain way. It's very different from what we're doing in this class. I ask you, he says this, what does he mean? Why do they do this? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? But this guy is like, a novelist should observe and appreciate form. And so this group noticed that this is also quite a good description of this story. We see things happening, we see people say stuff, but we don't get like an interpretation. The story doesn't try to make things make sense. We are appreciating its form and the patterns. So the narrator is a novelist or a fiction writer, and he has, I guess we could say he has written this story, including the character of the boyfriend. And the boyfriend describes the work of a novelist in a way that fits the story that this novelist has written, which includes the boyfriend describing it. It's it's a loop. So one way we can say is maybe the narrator is putting his own ideas into the mouth of the boyfriend, making the boyfriend say what he believes. Or maybe he's basing this story on the ideas of this person that he met in his life. Like maybe they did talk about what a novelist should be, and based on those ideas, our protagonist wrote this story. But of course, novelists write fiction. We don't know how much of this story actually happens to the narrator precisely because he is a novelist. But I think it's always fun when the story itself describes itself. So from this, we can say that the protagonist is observant, is a detailed or intentional writer. He writes with design and intention. Um, but maybe he doesn't have a deep human connection with the people in his life. For example, his wife. He's married, but we don't know anything about their marriage, except maybe he doesn't like spending all day with her because when the other two visit him, he says, where was it? Like she just happened to be away and he kept eating apples. Uh, Here, this is page 56. My wife had gone off to see some relatives that morning and left me alone at home. A pleasant day, bright and clear. Okay, so his wife's gone. It doesn't seem like he's thinking about her. To be fair, it doesn't seem like he's thinking about her throughout the whole story. So it's nothing unusual for him. And then he keeps eating apples and he calls it a pathological craving or some kind of premonition. So like this guy is also not very normal. A premonition of what? That things might get weird? So like the weird fact that he wants to eat so many apples is foreshadowing for the weird conversation he's going to have? Could it be related to weed? We know that for some people, marijuana makes them crave a certain kind of food. So he's saying like his craving for apples is foreshadowing the fact that he's going to end up smoking some weed later. So like he's saying this from the perspective of the narrator who already knows what's going to happen. He's the one telling us this story. Okay, and then finally, the third main character, the girl. This group mentioned that she's not very rich, doesn't have a lot of money, seems to depend on various boyfriends for financial support, doesn't seem to have many strong or long-term human connections in her life either. Uh, Whenever she, I guess, has enough money or like doesn't want to stay with a guy, she kind of dips and disappears. So nothing really tying her down to her own life. But the one commitment that the story gives her is that she takes a pantomime class. Where is this? Here, studying pantomime under somebody or other, a famous teacher, apparently. And we know that this is not a short-term commitment because after the girl disappears, one of the places that our main character looks for him is the pantomime class. Uh, right? Am I misremembering that? Okay, I may have misremembered that. But like she seems committed, right? When she's peeling the pretend oranges, it seems like it's something she does spend a lot of time on. And so I talked with that group about why. Why is this the only main thing in this character's life? And they were saying like the way that she talks about peeling these pretend oranges, um, page 54, it's not a question of making yourself believe there is an orange there. You have to forget there isn't one. And according to this group, this seems to be a good description of how she faces her life, her attitude towards her own life. There's really not a lot in her life, but instead of pretending that there is something, she makes herself forget that there isn't anything. So she's not trying to lead a good life. She is denying that her life is not good. It's like a state of denial. In fact, it's the same kind of denial that I think our main character has about his human relationships. He's married, but he spends some significant time with this young woman. Seems to have he enjoys her company despite there being no real connection between them. I think he's also kind of in a state of denial about his relationships with women in his own life. So, in a weird way, of these three main characters, the most honest one is the sociopath who burns barns, because he doesn't deny that burning barns is a criminal act. He knows exactly what he's doing. Okay, do you guys have other thoughts or questions about number one, about these three characters? All right, if not, let's move on to question two. We'd have to turn the entire workings of the universe upside down. So let's see, 53. So this is after he has described the girl's living situation, which is basically she doesn't have a lot of money, so she relies on a series of boyfriends. And in one perspective, you might say that she's sleeping around for money. Um, and so this sort of thing couldn't go on forever. If it could, we'd have to turn the entire workings of the universe upside down. So the group I talked with were saying about how he's feeling like maybe the way that she leads her life is unsustainable according to like social rules. Um, the what they picked up on was that the core theme of her human relationships seems to be let's call it manipulation. It's not for the person himself, it's for the fact that he can financially support her. And this group talked about the effects of this kind of relationship on the various men and on the young woman herself. So, like her boyfriends, if one day a boyfriend gets fed up and breaks up with her, he leaves. That's fine. And then, like, I guess she will go on and find another boyfriend. So, on the surface, this seems like it might work. But over the long term, and now we're talking about the girl herself, this group said that this might foster a mental habit of dependence and manipulation. So it makes it harder for her to see human relationships as about more than financially supporting her. Like, yes, she does have many conversations with our main character, but always he is the one paying for her food. And we even get a sense that she sometimes only calls him when she needs food. Sometimes she'd call me, typically when she was broke and needed a meal. So perhaps one reason why this kind of thing cannot go on forever is because it distorts human relationships. This group also talked about how this kind of lifestyle might give her a negative reputation. And of course, not everyone cares if their reputation is bad in this way, but our main character does seem to care. So he doesn't just say it sometimes looks like she's sleeping around for money. He tries very hard to say that he's not accusing her. It's not a judgment. I'm not suggesting there was even a glimmer of a hint that she was sleeping with guys for money. Too much denial seems to reveal something about the way that he thinks. In English, we have a phrase, she doth protest too much. Like too many objections reveal that this is something they actually want to cover up or deny or get away from. So the fact that he's saying he doesn't want to accuse her of sleeping around for money tells us that in his heart, he's kind of judging her for doing this. He doesn't think this is a good thing to do. So again, this story is from his perspective. He is describing things from his own point of view. So it does seem like he does not approve of what this girl is doing. Apparently, sleeping with guys for financial support. And that could also be related to when he's talking about the workings of the universe. Of course, he's not talking about the natural world, he's talking about the human world. So the workings of the universe here could be like social rules, how the world works, these kind of things. So in his mind, in his model of how society works, apparently women should not sleep around for money. So like this line is one of the few lines where we feel the protagonist's own moral judgments. We get a hint of the way that he thinks, the way that he looks at the world. And it seems like he has a kind of moral model of how things should be or should not be, what things people should do or should not do. And therefore, this would be related to later when he says like crazy people with crazy ideas. Those people are not following what he believes is the workings of the universe. This fact that he has a way of thinking about how society and people should work makes this story much more interesting because, as we just mentioned, the story does not seem to have a lot of judgment. So, does that mean that he is deliberately trying to set aside his morals to observe this pattern of human behavior? Or does it mean that he's a hypocrite who only applies his morals to some people and not other people? Okay, do you have other thoughts about question two? Okay, question three is going to take a little bit of time. So why don't we take an early break and come back at, yeah, let's come back at 11:10 like usual. Question 3. When the boyfriend is talking about burning barns and he says some crazy shit about simultaneity and balance, what in the world is he talking about? So let's look at page 60. So 59, he says he burns barns. And then page 60, this might be a strange way to put it. He took off again, spreading both hands, then bringing them slowly together before his eyes. But there's a lot of barns in this world, and I've got this feeling that they're all just waiting to be burned. Barns built way off by the seaside, barns built in the middle of rice fields. Well, anyway, all kinds of barns. But nothing that 15 minutes wouldn't burn down, nice and neat. It's like that's why they were put there from the very beginning. No grief to anyone. They just vanish. 1, 2, poof. And then he continues, I'm not judging anything. They're waiting to be burned. I'm simply obliging. You get it? I'm just taking on what's there. Just like the rain. The rain falls, streams swell, things get swept along. Does the rain judge anything? Well, all right. Does this make me immoral? In my own way, I like to believe I've got my own morals. And that's an extremely important force in human existence. A person can't exist without morals. I wouldn't doubt if morals weren't the very balance to my simultaneity. Okay, here's where we get into it. Right here, right. I'm here and I'm there. I'm in Tokyo and at the same time I'm in Tunis. I'm the one to blame and I'm also the one to forgive. Just as a for instance. It's that level of balance. Without such balance, I don't think we could go on living. It's like the linchpin to everything. Lose it and we literally go to pieces. But for the very reason that I've got it, simultaneity becomes possible for me. And he's saying that burning barns is an act by which to maintain my morals. But maybe we better just forget the morality. It's not essential. Wow, okay. What I want to say is the world is full of these barns. Me, I got my barns and you got your barns. It's the truth. I've been almost everywhere in the world, experienced everything, came close to dying more than once. Not that I'm proud of it or anything, but okay, let's drop it. Wow. Okay, so what is he talking about? Do you need to be high to understand this? So he's talking about like he sees barns and they are there to burn. They're like calling out to him. They need to be burned. Already we can see he's kind of crazy. And then he says, it's like water falling from the sky and streams. It's like nature. The call to burn barns for him is like nature. And so at first he's talking about his own morals, but you know, if it's a compulsion, if he feels the need, the urge to burn these barns, then morality is not essential. Morality is the what the standard between right and wrong. But if it's a compulsion, then right and wrong have nothing to do with this. That's why he says, let's just forget the morality. It's not essential. Instead, it's about maintaining some kind of balance. I should say that the group I discussed this question with also had many question marks about what is going on here. But we can find some ideas, see if we can put them together. So one of these is balance. Another one is Simultaneity, I'm here and I'm there. Also, I'm the one to blame and the one to forgive. But then he says this is just a for instance, it's just an example. So maybe he's not really talking about blame and forgiveness. But the group I discussed this with picked up on the idea of a split self, one half doing this, one half doing that. Applied to this person in this story, maybe we can say one half is leading a normal life and the other half is doing crazy stuff like burning barns. And so between these two, there needs to be a kind of balance, according to the boyfriend. So you can't be too crazy, but also you can't be too normal. That apparently is what he's thinking or feeling. Um, and then he says, the world is full of these barns. I got my barns, you got your barns. So apparently he's not talking about actual barns anymore, if he ever was talking about actual barns. So he's saying everybody has something in their life that they need to destroy in some crazy way, regardless of morality. And then he talks about his experience. He's experienced everything, came close to dying. What does that have to do with everything else in this conversation? We all have things that we feel we need to destroy. And when he destroys his things, it brings him a sense of balance. And the way that he makes sense of this feeling is by talking about two different sides of himself. Huh. So if, and then we know from the story that the protagonist does not find the barn that the boyfriend says he burned. We don't get to see an actually burned barn. So maybe he's talking about something else in his life that is creating an imbalance, and he feels the need to restore that balance. And then, of course, by the end of the story, the girl disappears. So maybe he's talking about his human relationships, that in some way the girl brings some kind of imbalance to his life. Well, as we discussed earlier, the girl kind of depends on him for financial support. That could be a kind of imbalance, right? Every time they go out, it's always him paying for stuff. She only, we can guess maybe she only comes find him when she needs food or cash. So that could feel like an imbalance that he needs to fix. And so I'm the one to blame, and I'm also the one to forgive. If I have to correct this kind of imbalance, I'm also the person who understands why I have to do this. And so I forgive myself. So maybe not blame and forgiveness, maybe compulsion and understanding. The way that he talks about this stuff, it does feel like the urge to burn barns comes first. And then all of this philosophical stuff tries to explain why he feels that urge. So blame first and then forgive. Compulsion first and then justification. That apparently is his worldview of how people work. Like we all have things, we all have some kind of compulsion to destroy in order to maintain a balance in life. Of course, he might just be overgeneralizing from his own experience. Right? He feels this way, so he thinks everybody feels this way, when in fact, maybe not. So like simultaneity, when he says I'm in Tokyo and I'm in Tunis, he's not talking about geography. He's talking about psychology. He is in two different mindsets at the same time. And I guess that gives him the necessary justification to burn barns or whatever it is that he does. Right? It's only part of him that does this. The other part tries to understand and justify. It's crazy. Okay, do you have other thoughts about this question? I mean, yeah, he is a crazy guy, but I mean, everybody has experienced rationalization, right? You do something and then you try to make it make sense to yourself. Why did I do this? And then you come up with reasons. So that part I think kind of makes sense. But like the idea that you need to feel the urge to destroy something, to restore balance, to blah, 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 that feels kind of crazy to me. I don't know. Maybe you feel different. Maybe I just happen to be a very well balanced person. I don't know. Thoughts? All right. Question 4. How would you describe the tone of the story? So the group I discussed this with said it's humorous in places. It sometimes can feel compassionate, although at this point they later modified to uh, like detached and denial. So like originally they were saying compassion because the author does not judge, or the protagonist does not judge what happens to him or what he sees or what he hears. But the lack of judgment might also be something else. Maybe it's not compassion. Uh, maybe it's cowardice. Maybe it's the fact that he feels hypocritical if he were to pass judgment. Like he himself is not the perfect guy, so he doesn't feel the right to judge other people, which is cowardice, right? He's afraid of passing judgment because of how he himself might also befall the same judgment. But humor is definitely one thing. Like all the stuff that we have been reading, the way that he talks, the way that our main character presents ideas, his language is very conversational, very loose, right? So, for example, watching one weird scene after the next slip past the car window. Weird in what way? We don't know because he's being very loose and very conversational. Um, Although when we focus on the language, we do have to remember that these are also translators' choices. The language is presented like this because this is how the translator decided to write it in English. And translators have reasons for this, right? Sometimes it is an accurate reflection of the original Japanese or the original language. Sometimes it is from the general mood of the story. They feel like for this kind of story, for this kind of person, we should use this kind of language. But we should remember that it may not be Murakami's choice to present language like this. But like the main tone that I heard from this group and also other groups is this story feels mysterious and even creepy. The main reason, of course, is because of that discussion of barn burning, and we have no idea what the conversation is actually about. Um, and the author, the narrator, the protagonist, nobody tries to explain things. And then the girl disappears for no reason. So, like, things happen and we don't know why. It's very mysterious, very creepy. But this feeling also comes through in some of the minor details as well. So this is why the second part of the question is, what textual elements help to create this tone? Uh, a lot of stuff appears in the story that is not given a lot of significance or importance. For example, the main one, I was married, but that didn't matter either. How could a marriage not matter? Or as we saw earlier, when the boyfriend says, morality is not essential. How could morality be not essential? And then we also have very uncertain uses of language. Apparently, uh, probably, naturally, I don't know this for certain. Um, Not exactly the best explanation, describing his own explanation. He's saying, like, I'm trying to say something, but it's not coming through very clearly. So, like, from the very beginning of the story, we have this feeling of uncertainty. And it kind of prepares us for the main uncertainty of the story. Well, I guess two main uncertainties. One, what happened to the barn, and two, what happened to the girl. Right? So again, I don't really know. Blah, blah, blah. And so in this mood of mystery, uncertainty, and very loose, slangy use of language, which also adds to the uncertainty, right? If I say this thing, very slangy use of words, right? This thing, either you know what I'm talking about or you don't know what I'm talking about. So the way that he uses language allows a lot of room for interpretation, for different people to have different understandings. And that also adds to the uncertainty. So if we look at this together, what effects does this have on your understanding of the story? First of all, as this group mentioned, it makes it harder to understand what's actually happening. But also, because our narrator does not present a clear picture of himself, he seems to mainly be an observer. We don't really have a sense of his values or how his mind works. We have some clues, but we don't have a clear picture. We don't have a sense of what he really cares about other than himself. So when he describes things, when he tells us things happen, it also feels kind of uncertain because he is the person telling us. We don't have reason to doubt that what he says is true. So, like, the information that he gives us is probably accurate. But why does he focus on these things and not those things? Why or how does he react when people tell him weird stuff or when he encounters weird situations? We don't know. So we could call him morally unreliable. When someone tells you a story, they usually have a specific point of view. Either they think, oh, this was crazy, it should not have happened, or they're saying this is scandalous, these people are terrible people, or whatever. They have a point of view. They have a specific attitude. Not in this story. In this story, the narrator just presents things and mostly does not give us a specific point of view or standard of judgment. And that makes the story feel even more mysterious and confusing. It's not how we usually tell stories. So, because we don't have a clear sense of the storyteller, it makes the story itself feel less clear. And that adds to the uncertainty of the plot and the other characters and like the whole thing. Okay, do you have other thoughts about question 4? All right, finally, question 5. What do you think happens to the young woman? I think most people came to the same conclusion. The boyfriend probably killed her. And why might it be related to the boyfriend's most recent barn burning? Like in the story, he talks about burning barns. He says it's very close to the main character's place, but the main character never finds a burned barn. Instead, what disappears is the girl. And like when the boyfriend says it's very close to our main character, and then later after she disappears, he tells the main character that she didn't have many friends except for our main character, and that she did trust you. I'm on page 65. You're someone special to her. So in a symbolic sense, she is close to him. Just like he's saying the barn he burned is close to him. And then also like just like from the general vibe of the story, the boyfriend does seem like a serial killer, right? He does seem like somebody who would not care about killing a person or two. Um, and then finally, one last piece of evidence, or I guess a clue. We can't really prove it. But one last clue is precisely the fact that this story includes the disappearance of the girl. Like in real life, you could have two separate parts, right? Guy says he burns barns, but he says it when he's high. And then later, like maybe a week or two later, the girl disappears. In real life, you would be doing things in that week. You may not put these two things together. But in the story, these two things are put together. And so we readers are led to believe there is some kind of connection between these two events. The guy saying he's going to burn a barn, and then the girl disappearing. So, in other words, one reason we think that the boyfriend killed her is because the way that the story is arranged and the way that specific information is presented to us leads us to that kind of conclusion. And also the guy snapping his fingers. Did you notice this? So when he's about to talk about burning barns, let's see if I can find. You know what? I'm gonna cheat. Huh. So yes, at the near the beginning of the scene, when he's presenting his weed, he snaps his fingers, and then when he starts talking about the pace of burning barns, he snaps his fingers. And then finally, when he's talking about how the girl disappeared, he's snapping his fingers. It's a very subtle hint that these three moments are connected. We know how the weed and the barn burning are connected, right? He says both are criminal acts. And by the way, that's a threat. Did you catch that? He's threatening the main character, saying, if you tell the police I'm burning barns, I'll tell the police we were doing illegal drugs. So those two are connected. And then when he's talking about the girl disappearing, he also snaps his fingers, which hints to us that this is also connected to the previous two things. And the most direct connection is since we didn't find the barn. When he says he likes to burn barns, what he really likes to do is kill people. Maybe specifically kill girlfriends. Not sure. Okay, do you have any thoughts about today's discussion or the story that you would like to share with the class? All right, so um, before next week, we're going to read um, I think it's the last story in the handout, The Headstrong Historian by um, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. So let me introduce this. And then next week, we're also going to, as it says here, introduce the midterm exam. And the midterm exam will be a 1-week online open book take home essay question. So it will begin after class and then it will end before midnight on week 8, October 27. And so because the class time for week 8, you will still be doing the midterm. You probably won't have the time or energy to read the next thing. So for week 8, we're going to watch a movie. Um, I guess that also means next week, I also have to introduce the novel for the second half of the semester. Um, and if you want a paper copy of the handout, I have to give that to you next week also. Yeah, okay, so let's take a quick survey. Do you want a paper copy of the novel? If yes, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Great. Okay, so I will. Why did I ask you now? I should ask you next week. Okay, so like next week, I will put some copies in the IC and you can grab them for yourself. So that's what's going to happen for the next few weeks, okay? All right, so next week we have our regular discussion. I introduce the exam. I'll introduce the novel first, and then I'll introduce the exam. Class ends, you do the exam. The following week is a film, and then after the exam ends, you have to read the beginning of the novel, and we'll come and discuss that. Back to our regularly scheduled programming. Okay, so let's introduce next week. Adichie is a Nigerian author. Nigeria, if you don't know, Nigeria's official language or one of its official languages is English because of British colonial history. So she's writing in her native language, which is somewhat unusual for this class. Most of what we're reading has been translated, but not that story. But of course, Nigerian English is not exactly the same as American English or British English. So there might be some words that are not commonly seen in American or British English. Um, Another thing to know about Adichie is that she comes from a region of Nigeria called Biafra. So like after the British left, the way that the British organized the country is kind of regardless of ethnic distributions. So as I'm sure most of you know, when Western powers colonized the country, they didn't really care about neighborhoods or who lived where. They kind of like cut it up for convenience and especially for transportation to help them get economically valuable materials transported out of the country faster. So whether it is divisions between countries like national borders or divisions within countries, regional borders, a lot of them don't really make sense in terms of the people who actually live there. And this is the situation for Nigeria also. Um, Nigeria is composed mainly of two groups of people, and the minority group, the Igbo, live in the southern province of Biafra. Um, During a period of Nigerian independent history, the Biafrans started feeling like the majority government was discriminating against them and oppressing them. And so they started a rebellion, launching the Nigerian Civil War. This is in the 60s and 70s. And so Adichie is from that area of the country that began the Civil War, that tried to fight for independence, and they failed. So, as with any member of a losing side of a war, that has some historical and psychological effects. And so, in a way, that makes Adichie a bit of an outsider in her own country. Of course, she's not alone, right? It's a whole group, it's a whole region. But when talking about Nigeria as a country as a whole, her perspective is slightly different from what we might call the mainstream Nigerian perspective. And it gives her, we might say, uh, a different kind of observation of a life and society in Nigeria, and also how other countries perceive Nigerians and Nigerian immigrants if and when they arrive in other places. So Adichie later immigrated to the United States, and some of her work is also about that experience of living in a foreign country with strange customs, even though you apparently speak the same language. Now, this story, The Headstrong Historian, uh, is slightly different from all that. Like what I just said kind of informs her style and motivation and concerns, but The Headstrong Historian is kind of like historical fiction. It spans the lifetime of a single woman from before the British arrived to after the British leave. But it's not like from the perspective of like high politics or geopolitics. It's from the perspective of an ordinary person with her own concerns in her life. And as we read, we get a sense of how colonization affects ordinary people, not just like political leaders and boundaries, but the culture, the belief systems, family relationships. I personally think it's a really great story. So you have that to look forward to. Please finish that before next week. Questions? All right. So that's it for today. Read the thing and then come back next week.